LinkedIn presents.
Is work as we know it fundamentally broken? And what can we do about it? I'm Aarons-Mele, and this is The Anxious Achiever, the show that looks at the intersection of mental health and work and asks, how can we do both better?
The LinkedIn Podcast Network is sponsored by SAP. SAP Business AI. Embedded across SAP solutions, it drives immediate impact. From Joule, your digital assistant, to AI-powered capabilities portfolio-wide, make confident decisions using your own data. SAP Business AI. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI.
Hey, I'm Gianna Prudenti.
And I'm Jermaine Jackson Gadsden. We're the hosts of Let's Talk Offline from LinkedIn News and iHeart Podcasts.
There's a lot to figure out when you're just starting your career. That's where we come in.
Think of us as your work besties you can turn to for advice.
And if we don't know the answer, we bring in people who do, like negotiation expert Maury Taheri-Poor.
If you start thinking about negotiations as just a conversation, then I think it sort of eases us a little bit.
Listen to Let's Talk Offline on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We've all had the experience of being excited to start our perfect new job. But then, once we're there, warning signs start piling up. The situation feels more toxic or more chaotic or more stressful with each passing day. You know, every year that I'm involved in the workplace mental health movement, I become both more hopeful and also more disappointed. Some days I feel like trying to address mental health at work during late-stage capitalism is just a loser's game. We're going to talk about all of these issues today with one of my favorite thinkers about all things work, former human resources leader and major work influencer, Laurie Ruettimann. She looks deeply about how workplace culture affects our health, our well-being, and also how we can start to heal when we're working in capitalistic systems that aren't really set up to make us, frankly, thrive, right? They're just kind of not set up for most of us. So we'll dive in with Laurie, get some useful advice about how not to get into those toxic situations. And I start with a simple question that might be on a lot of your minds. Is work broken?
It's hard to say that work is broken because work is work. And the system itself doesn't favor workers. It favors owners. It favors investors. It favors shareholders. So in that way, work is doing what it should do, which is making a certain group of people extremely wealthy. So some would argue that it's not broken. I would say that the system is unsustainable. And in that way, it's broken for, 90% of us, if not more. But it's like a semantics game, right? Is capitalism and work doing what it should, which is getting a few people rich, and then it's okay? Or is it just relentless, cruel, and unsustainable, which is really my experience and my family's experience? So in that way, yeah, it's broken.
Except for Wall Street and hedge funds.
Well, and except for certain leaders of tech companies, leaders of manufacturing companies, right? In fact, the people who really thrive in this world are people who are owners of raw goods and materials organizations, right? They figured out how to mine both the people and the planet for profit, and everybody else is just kind of along for the ride. And where you fall on the organizational ladder determines how much you're going to benefit from a system. But ultimately, the system isn't built for you. It's not built for me. And it's certainly not built for, people who have been historically marginalized in our society. And to think that we could ever, while being in it, rebuild it is kind of naive. And yet, I worry about burning it all down because that's going to hurt a lot of people as well. So I don't want to light a match and throw some gasoline on capitalism, but I also don't want to see it perpetuate in the same way going forward. So it's this catch-22, it's this tension, it's this pull that really drives a lot of my work and a lot of my thinking.
You have this distinguished resume of someone who has worked at the very hallowed halls of capitalism, like Monsanto. Now you've really evolved to a very questioning place, and as someone who, it seems to me, has tried to take herself outside of the corporate system. Can you talk a little bit about your evolution?
Sure. Years ago when I was growing up, people would ask me, what did I want to be when I was an adult? And I really just wanted to be left alone. I like people, I like animals, but I didn't really have this vision of myself that was aligned with a job. And if I had to pick something, I would say I want to be a weather girl, because that's what you said in the 70s and the 80s, right? Because I would be on TV and I'd be bringing people information every day, and they would be happy or they would be sad, but they would watch and they would learn. And so I was excited thinking I could do that job, but I'm terrible at science. But what I didn't envision for myself is going to college. Like, that was not a thing in my family. We didn't go to college. I didn't envision having a career where I would wear a suit or work someplace with air conditioning. Like, that was just not a thing. We were very working class. We lived in Chicago. At one point, I lived with my grandmother, and she was taking care of 8 grandkids. So it was very hectic. Had an up and down relationship with my mother, and ended up living with other people because she just couldn't take care of me. And in my high school years, my father took me in for a couple of years, and I met my high school boyfriend and his amazing family, just champions, just wonderful people. And they were like, you're going to go to college. So I had to learn, like, what's an SAT? What's an ACT, right? And I was extremely verbose and gifted, right? I mean, I did well in school, but people looked at me and did not say, this woman is going to go to law school, or this woman is going to light the world on fire. And so when my ACT and SAT scores came back in, they were amazed. And they said, all right, let's try to figure out a path for you, right? Not only the high school boyfriend's family, but also the guidance counselor suddenly emerged, right? And so suddenly a door opened for me. And I thought, okay, I don't want to blow this. I really felt like I did not want to blow this opportunity. So while I considered myself to be a punk rock girl and a little alternative and had different views of the world and didn't identify with work, I knew that I never wanted to go back. Like the way women are feeling right now. I saw a glimmer of something, and I didn't want to go back to the old way of living. And so when I went to college, I realized, I had to take on student debt, and it was on me to pay off my student debt. So instead of going to law school after receiving my undergraduate degree, I went to work in an internship at a candy factory in St. Louis on the Mississippi River. And I saw that the fastest way for me to get out of debt and to have a life that I wanted to have was to fake it and to sign up in corporate America. And that's how I ended up at Monsanto. They were the prevailing employer in St. Louis. And I thought, well, where am I going to make more money? It's either that or Anheuser-Busch. And so I knew that I could separate out, I could compartmentalize my own individual beliefs and just what I needed to get done for the job, because my identity wasn't attached to it. Now, the longer I worked in corporate America, the more I forgot and started to conflate my identity and my job title. But at least at the beginning, I'm like, no, I got this. I got this. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to work. Eventually I'll go back to grad school.
Did you wear a suit?
I did. I wore my favorite thing about working in corporate America is that I really thought I had to wear a mask. And so I went to the J.C. Penney and I got, sensible slacks and cardigans. And I actually had a French manicure for a while, and I bobbed my hair and covered my tattoos. And my most favorite place to shop back in the day was Talbot's Petites, because I'm 5 feet tall. And I thought, this is what's going to make me look like a grown-up. This is what's going to make me look like the professional HR lady that, my boss wants me to be, that I need to be in order to make more money. So I really invested a lot in creating a mask. And I felt like that mask would protect me, that I would always know my internal self. But eventually, work is work, and you get thrown in and you forget. And so, yeah, it's a long way of saying I do have a distinguished career. But at least at the beginning, I thought, okay, I can be two people. I can separate this out. And, that was hard for me at the end.
What happened?
Well, the more money they threw at me, the more I felt like I had to perform and earn it. I don't know why. There are plenty of people who don't earn the money they're paid. But I felt like, oh my goodness, I just got a 6-figure paycheck. I better act like it. You know? I also saw people around me doing well and seeming to thrive. And I lost the cognitive ability to separate out the fact that they were performing too. So, in order to deal with all of this, I ate a lot. I drank a lot. I went to a lot of therapy. And I took a lot of SSRIs, which made me feel terrible. But it was like the late 90s, early 2000s, right? And I worked in the pharma industry, eventually moved on to Pfizer. And I thought, well, this is my world I'm in. And if I feel terrible, I'm going to take Zoloft. Well, it turns out that was not the right path for me. And I was in an airport one night and I sneezed and threw out my back. So that was problematic at 29 years old.
Oh my God.
And I also was eating for dinner at the airport Starburst and drinking Pepsi because I was in between flights. And I thought, well, this is all I have time to fuel myself with. And I was also reading an Us Weekly because God forbid I read anything related to fiction or art or the things that I love. Right now, I'm just going to pop in some pop culture to pass the time between flights. And I saw an article about a celebrity who allegedly had weight loss surgery. And she's a terrible human being, but she was suddenly happy. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to try that. And so, not being morbidly obese, just being mildly overweight, I took all the money that I earned, which was not a lot of money to go do this. And I bucked the system like months later and went down to Tijuana, Mexico and had weight loss surgery. I had a gastric lap band. So I was not even heavy enough to qualify in Tijuana, Mexico. And I bribed my way into that clinic. And that is my story.
Was this a good decision?
In the short term, possibly. In the long term, I don't know. I go back and forth on it.
Mm.
In the short term, what a lap band surgery or any gastric bypass surgery, sleeve surgery will do is it will metabolically and scientifically reboot your system. It can't help but do that, right? You have a different relationship with how you digest food. And I lost weight. And in that way, I met certain biological markers that society tells me is healthy. But in the long run, I now recognize that that's just a capitalistic answer to a capitalistic problem that I was having. And while being thin superficially can open doors, life doesn't have to get so bad that you have to go to Mexico and have sketchy lap band surgery. And so that is the lesson of my life. Before things get so effing bad that you are desperate to escape your reality, maybe take a step back and find other interventive measures. And that has been what has driven me over the past almost 20 years now. Before you have to leave your husband, before you have to quit your job, before you have to scream at your boss, before you have to go into your car and nap in the middle of the day like I did just to get away from the chaos at work. Cover your body in secret tattoos because you're so angry, which I, again, am a testament to this, Before you do these things, before you think the only thing I can do is just do the grandest gesture to escape it all, maybe go to therapy. And if that's not working, maybe find a different therapist. Maybe take a vacation, maybe use your PTO, right? There are all of these coping mechanisms that we think that's not going to fix it. That's not going to fix it. And we just gloss over it. We don't explore it. And so in my life, in my work, in my accredited coaching, I talk people off the ledge because I've been on the ledge and I've jumped off, and it does not solve the problem you're looking to solve.
Laurie, you interviewed Dr. Scott Kellogg when you did an incredible sort of mini-series of your punk rock HR podcast called Corporate Drinker, which I love so much. And one of the things that you talked about with Dr. Kellogg, he's an addiction medicine specialist, he's a psychiatrist, is how we try to heal through changes in our identity. And that this isn't usually it's not usually a good thing, although sometimes he also says we need to find new identities that conflict with our addiction to heal, which is also super interesting.
Yeah.
I'm so curious when you talked about masking. I mean, you were masking in corporate America to get ahead. Being thin is a way that we mask as women and as men.
Yeah, absolutely. Being thin, coloring our hair, wearing a wig, all of these things. I mean, there are many ways to mask. Our fashion choices can be masking. And while I understand it, and for someone like me, it was so necessary in order to build a career, to move from pretty dire circumstances of my childhood into a very privileged life that I have right now. Masking comes at a cost. And so I think if you're gonna mask, make sure it's worth it. Like it's real important, and that it doesn't cause other long-term downstream effects. So for example, I achieved a certain thinness in my very early 30s. And after a decade of putting on weight and just being normal, right? Eating to fuel my body, but being told that it's not appropriate. So I achieved thinness. And for all intents and purposes, people thought I was killing it in the world. And I was killing it in a lot of ways, because I'm just naturally born to kill it, but it didn't have anything to do with my thinness. And keeping up that thinness for many, many years came at a cost until I hit my feral 40s. And I'm like, I need to figure out a different way. My lap band has not been active for many years. I just try to be kind to myself. I am in therapy with someone who's absolutely amazing and has deep expertise in the female body and in diet culture. And so I understand that masking is what we have to do in our capitalistic, patriarchal society. And sometimes there's no choice. But when we do it, it should be so serious and we should think about it so importantly to make sure that we're not compromising other aspects of our lives. So, for example, today, I put in a little hairspray, which I normally wouldn't do. But that kind of masking isn't going to cause me to have a psychic breakdown in a decade. So these are choices that we have to think about, and living a more conscious, thoughtful, intentional life, and then bringing that energy to our choices is really the important work that we all need to do.
It's funny. I always think that and I can't speak for men, if women were honest, and I think women of our generation, because it's different now. We grew up in a time when being thin was coded in a very high status way.
Yes.
I think this is a quote in Bridget Jones, if I could do a calculation of all the hours I have lost to thinking about my weight, I could probably have won a Nobel Prize. I'm pretty sure that's what Bridget Jones says. And I think that, yes, the success identity, certainly in the culture I grew up with, white, upper middle class, privileged, is coded thin.
And also there's a message around working class or quote unquote lower class individuals. They are heavy. They are fat with that capital F, right?
In this country, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And the kind of sexist, racist, misogynist language we use to describe, homophobic language we use to describe people in historically marginalized communities is atrocious, right? And I think I was caught up in this moment of fixing the outside fixes the systems that created all of these inequalities, right? And of course, that's not true. It's such a naive and stupid and even privileged mistake that I made. The work is within me. It's within my soul to be resilient, to understand the inherent privilege I have in just being born, and also my obligation to do right by myself and others. And that's the path that I've been on. So one of the things that was difficult for me and is still difficult for me to piece apart is the fact that because I still present as thin and I'm blonde and I look perky, I am afforded opportunities that others are not. And I am in a constant conversation with myself of what am I going to do with the platform that I have? Am I doing right by it? And also, can't I just live? Why do I have to do anything? So it's this double tax of having privilege, recognizing the privilege, but also as a middle-aged woman, not having the privilege I used to have, right? It's this constant navigation within the world. All I can do is do my best. All I can do is learn and grow and commit to continuous learning, which is something I write about all the time, because when you're not learning, you're not growing. And when you're not growing, you're not thriving for yourself and thriving within communities. So I am constantly out there trying to listen, trying to learn, being quiet. I'm on sabbatical right now, and I'm using that time to just pay attention, to take classes, to go meet with people I normally wouldn't meet with. And also to have a little fun, because learning can be fun as well. So I don't know. I try. And also I'm a jerk as well at times. So, it's like all of it. It's all of it. I'm either insufferable or I'm incredibly lovely. I don't know. And it's probably both.
Tired of AI hype without results? SAP Business AI isn't just talk. It's embedded across SAP solutions, driving immediate impact for your organization. From Joule, your digital assistant, to AI-powered capabilities throughout the SAP portfolio, SAP Business AI helps you make confident decisions based on your own data, all while maintaining the highest security and privacy standards for growth-focused businesses. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI.
Hey, I'm Gianna Prudenti.
And I'm Janae Jackson Gadsden. We're the hosts of Let's Talk Offline, a new podcast from LinkedIn News and iHeart Podcasts.
When you're just starting out in your career, you have a lot of questions, like how do I speak up when I'm feeling overwhelmed?
Or, can I negotiate a higher salary if this is my first real job? Girl, yes.
Each week, we answer your unfiltered work questions.
Think of us as your work besties you can turn to for advice.
And if we don't know the answer, we bring in experts who do, like resume specialist Morgan Sanner.
The only difference between the person who doesn't get the job and the person who gets the job is usually who applies.
Yeah, I think a lot about that quote. What is it? Like, you miss 100% of the shots you never take?
Yeah, rejection is scary, but it's better than you rejecting yourself.
Together, we'll share what it really takes to thrive in the early years of your career,
without sacrificing your sanity or sleep.
Listen to Let's Talk Offline on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
One of the questions I wrote down when I was thinking about our conversation, and it's something I have actually been wrestling with myself for a couple of years now, is it possible to have good workplace mental health in late-stage capitalism?
I'm not sure it's possible to have good workplace health ever. Historically, we've not had good workplace health. We've had people who maybe have benefited financially from a system. I'm thinking about my dad, who had a high school diploma and somehow, through grit and resilience, worked his way into the phone company, which when he did it was a utility, which meant lifetime employment. And so as a working class white dude, got this job at the phone company, rose up through the ranks to middle management, right? And you think would have been grateful. Made more money than his parents ever made, which was not a tremendous amount, but had a decent enough job, had health insurance, could take in his daughter when she was struggling living with her mother, right? Like all of these things he had access to, and yet really struggled in that system, really resented the power dynamics, really was made to feel all the time like, how come Joe got promoted and I didn't? How come this person has this and I don't? And didn't feel a lot of gratitude. And that's not just my dad. That's many men of that generation. Always felt like something was lacking in the work environment, did not have good workplace mental health. And in order to kind of deal with that comparison effect, which is the thief of joy,
yes,
drank heavily. So this idea that there's ever been really great workplace health, if it was not good for my dad, who was in a position of relative power and privilege. How is it good for African American women? How is it good for members of the LGBTQ plus community? It was never good, never good. So here we are in late stage capitalism, and we've learned mental health lingo, but we've not made any structural changes. None. Because it doesn't benefit the people in power. It doesn't make them any more money. It could. There's all sorts of studies out there and examples of companies who have tried to do it right. But even a company like Whole Foods eventually sold out to Amazon, right? And even that guy, John, the beloved founder, of Whole Foods, kind of turned out to be a jerk. So yeah, I don't believe that positive mental health is possible through the lens of work. It's possible in our own lives. We fix work by fixing ourselves first. So it's important to have wonderful experiences, multiple ways that we see ourselves as parents, as members of communities, as students, as whatever we are, as goofballs, and then bring all that good stuff to work and then try to do the best we can and go home to the people we love, as Toni Morrison once wrote.
What would you say to the people who say, well, that's so American, Laurie. We're always in America. It's always about fix yourself, do more yoga, learn to meditate. But the system is so broken. Don't put the onus on people to try to fix themselves.
So I love it when I'm off in Europe and people are like, oh, you Americans, you don't get any PTO. And when you take it, it's terrible. And look at us, we're Italian and we just drink wine all the time, right?
Totally.
Turns out our American culture is spreading. These negative systems are spreading. And even though there are legislative efforts to stop it, and there are unions that are always striking, the misery index is spreading. It's contagious. And so I would say that even when people are in a good system, whether they're intentionally working on themselves or not, they are working on themselves. They're drinking the wine, they're eating the bread, they're eating the cheese, they're eating the pasta, they're taking a nap, right? And so they're just doing it because it's second nature to them. And so here in America, we don't have that privilege. So we are on a constant quest to do these things because our systems are not built for it. And the way the world works right now is that in a decade, in 2 decades, France, Europe, Germany, all of these countries are probably going to look more like us than we're going to look like them if we don't have a major societal global intervention. So I worry about that.
One of the things that you've written, and you use alcohol as sort of a metaphor in a way. You said, I question why companies invest heavily in inclusion and wellness programs and harassment training only to undermine these efforts with alcohol-fueled events. It's impossible to perform optimally and create psychologically safe environments when alcohol exacerbates power differentials and impairs our judgment.
Well, I can't argue with myself on that, except companies are no longer showing the same kind of investment in DEI initiatives, in inclusion, as they were even 6 months ago. And so I think we're post DEI at this point, and we're entering into this new phase where we're just going to let companies pretend to be inclusive and just go along for the ride, right? Or what I most worry about going forward is that we're going to get back on this train where we think what's good for the organization is good for people. And that was a message that was very present when I was starting out in the workforce in the late 90s and the 2000s. Like, what's good for Wall Street is good for the working class. And we know that's not true. But our memories, I don't know, they're short term and we forget. And so we're going to applaud when the Dow continues to reach record highs, right? And the NASDAQ reaches record highs. And we're going to forget that so many of us, it's like 50% of children in America are below the poverty level. That is a crime. It's criminal. People walking around on the street unhoused, that's criminal with the amount of wealth that we have in this country. And we know the answer. The answer is redistribute the money. The answer is universal basic income. We know these things work.
You are a big fan of UBI. Now, what do you think about the fact that a lot of the AI oligarchs are funding a lot of these basic income experiments?
Well, the AI oligarchs know that eventually work is over. Work as we know it is over. And I think they're willing to fund UBI in order to keep people from rioting on the streets. But money alone isn't the answer. It's not just giving people a check. It's making sure that the systems we have are changed and beautiful, that people can still continue to educate themselves, that they can learn and they can grow, not necessarily for the skills for the workforce, just for the benefit of humanity. So I think the answer is not just giving people a check. And I sit on a board of an organization that's really interested in telling stories around these UBI projects. But we have to do more. We have to really think about housing. We have to think about food. We have to think about nutrition. We have to think about access to healthcare, all of it, childcare, caregiving. I think one of the really beautiful things UBI does is allow us to be caregivers to one another. There's time for that.
Yes,
And I don't mean just
that's right.
caregiving for people who are sick, but giving care to people who just need a little bit of help, or just showing care when someone is going through a moment, right? UBI will allow us to do that if we let it, if we're open to it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. The most recent study, right, showed that one of the profound effects from having a $1,000 check every month was that people felt they had a little time to plan, to not always be in a cortisol-induced panic.
Yeah. Isn't that beautiful? The other thing that happens with UBI is that people, although they feel guilty about it, allow themselves to go out to dinner.
Yeah.
They allow themselves
Have
to
leisure.
Yeah, they allow themselves to take a day off work. They allow themselves to participate in the economy differently. And so that money, instead of being circulated back into big corporations, gets circulated back into community. That's the power. That's the real interesting thing about UBI. So you take someone who hasn't had a vacation day and you allow them to, I don't know, go out, go to the park, get some ice cream, go to dinner. That money stays local. That money is not going to a big corporation. So I just think there's real power and promise in UBI, but there are also some serious efforts in states like Florida to fight against UBI, saying that no public funds can be used for UBI. So many of these efforts for these UBI experiments are being funded privately. And that's fine. I will take private money all day long. But eventually, we are going to really need to rethink our economy, our tax base. All of it needs to change in order to support this future of work that is more algorithmically driven rather than humanly driven.
Okay, so as we sort of close out, I want to get a little bit practical. This is a leadership show. This is a show for people who are ambitious, maybe wearing that mask, but maybe it's working for them. You know, some days it does, some days it doesn't. You have written that one of the wonderful features of capitalism, and I think everybody can get a good chuckle at this, is that sometimes work becomes like a cult, right?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
those of us who take our careers, who are very career identified, right? We actively participate in cultish behavior sometimes. Leaders are culpable in this, you say, and not just the CEO. So I want to talk about, give us some coaching here. I'm a leader. I recognize that I work in a company that is not doing any big favors for most people, but I need my job. I like my job. How do I bring healthiness to my team? What are some of the levers of power that I might have?
I get what you're saying. You're a leader and, you know, your company is not terrible, but it's not great. You kind of like what you do. You like the people around you. And you think, okay, I'm a leader. I want to bring a little something extra to my job. I want to inspire people maybe, or just, I don't know, lighten the vibe.
Yeah.
What do I do? And I still think, first of all, we are all leaders. We are all individual leaders. We are self-leaders. So first of all, recognizing that you are a leader, but that you manage adults who can make choices about their attitudes, their opinions, about their lives is liberating and freeing, because then it's not all on you to fix things. It's not your job to solve if somebody is having a crabby day, like that. You can't do anything about it. So, all right, you're a leader and you want to lighten the vibe of your workforce.
Promote well-being, maybe.
First of all, you can't do it if you don't live it in your own life. So again, we fix work for other people by fixing it for ourselves first. So how's your well-being? How's your attitude? How's your sleep? Nobody ever solved big problems by fueling themselves with their toddler's leftover breakfast. If you are eating the leftover toast for breakfast that your toddler didn't want, you're not going to do anything during the day. So as a leader, making sure that you're doing what you need to do in the body that you've been given to feel good, to feel strong, to feel cognitively aware. I don't know about you, but I cannot think straight on 4 hours of sleep. And yet so many individuals burn the midnight oil, get up early, deal with their families just because they think they have to, right? And they may have to at this stage of their lives, and then try to come to work and do really great work. Something's going to give, and it's usually the work. So whatever you can do to cut out the fat out of your life, right? If you've got 5 minutes to be on TikTok, you also have 5 minutes to just take a breath and to pause, right?
To not be on TikTok.
To not be on TikTok. And I have learned this in my own life, to cut out social media in those, like I'm on Instagram all the time, right? I do these things, but I also don't do it as much as I used to do because the quality of my life is degraded when I'm trimming from the edges, right? So I need to focus. So you fix work by fixing yourself first. So as a leader, making sure that you show up, that you're the best version of yourself that you can be on that day, and you model those behaviors. I think the second most important thing you can do is something that my friend Erica Keswin talks about, which is really taking a pause and asking people how they're doing and meaning it, it. So it's not just like, hey, how you doing? Let's get into this meeting. But hey, how you doing? How are you really doing? Don't fake it. Be curious in your people. Just ask them. It's amazing making that human to human connection, what that does. Again, I've had tremendous bosses in my life who took an interest in me just as a person, wanted to know what kind of rando punk rock music I like, And then I've had bosses who disregarded me and were like, okay, you're just here to do the things I need you to do so I can get ahead. So pick a lane and live that lane. Be the boss who genuinely cares about your people. I think the third and most interesting thing you can do is have a life outside of work and talk about it. Boy, oh boy. It's like when you see your teacher at the mall and you're like, whoa, they shop at Sears too? Whatever. I love it when my bosses talk about the movie they saw or the things they did over the weekend that have nothing to do with the entrapment of being parents, right? But, I watched the show or I caught this band. Be the boss, be the leader who's got a life outside of work and bring that good stuff to the office. It has a positive cascading effect. There's a ton of research on this. What I'm telling you is just be a decent human being. And it's amazing how if you take the focus away from work and focus it on people, the work improves. And again, it's not just Laurie Ruettimann, it's research that is fueling my opinion. But today I'm here to tell you that test it. Have a conversation about your favorite Netflix show if you've not done it. Have a conversation about what you had for dinner last night, but talk about how you loved it. Or for example, I love Jenny's ice cream. I feel like I should be a brand ambassador. And when I can talk to people about Jenny's ice cream,
peach cobbler.
Oh my gosh, it's one of my favorites. And the lemon blueberry. I shine when I talk about ice cream. And other people shine too. They get excited. And those are the moments we live for, both at work and outside of work. So do more of that. Have a little bit more fun is what I'm saying.
My last question, asking for a friend, aka me. I am really trying to decouple my whole identity from my professional status and my work. It is really hard. I have spent so many years melding the two.
Yeah.
Loving the attention and the rewards that I don't know how not to sort of sit up and beg. What's your advice? How do I exit the cult and start having an identity that isn't contingent on whether someone at work thinks I'm doing a good job?
Yeah. I'm very fond of saying that your work is not your worth. This is something I learned throughout my life. I'm almost 50 years old. I'll be 50 in January. And it's also not a binary. Work can be beautiful. You can solve really amazing problems and be very proud of that. We need people to be doctors and lawyers right now before, the algorithms do all of this. We need people to be surgeons, and we need people to volunteer. We need them to go into community and teach. We need caregivers. We need healthcare professionals. And there's nothing.
We really need electricians and plumbers.
Heck yeah, absolutely. Or we need to learn to do this for ourselves, right? So we need people to contribute to society. And it's okay to be proud of your job, but it is a journey of a lifetime to undo capitalism and to recognize that you don't only just have to be your job. And there's no simple path to figuring this out. If there were, I'd be a bazillionaire, right? I'd be on permanent sabbatical. I'm not on permanent sabbatical, but I do like this idea of learning and growing. Like, this is something that I go back to over and over again. So when I have executives who come to me and say, I'm done, I'm quitting, I'm going to be a consultant. I'm like, first of all, you don't even know what you're asking for. You are a paycheck player. Even at the highest level, you work for your paycheck. You are not going to come out into the real world and consult, at least not right away. You need an on-ramp to that. So don't quit your job. Your families need you, but you could do a lot of things. So I worked with a woman who was a high-level executive, and I asked her, when was the last time you felt happy? And she said when she was a child, she figure skated. So I asked, when was the last time you were on skates? And it had been decades. And she's old, she's arthritic, she had all kinds of excuses. And I said, well, get yourself a pair of figure skates, even if they're used from Play It Again Sports, even if you need one of those walkers on the ice, which is what I would need because I am not coordinated in that way. Why don't you get out on the ice with no pressure? No one's around. Like, find a way and just go be goofy and do this for me as part of a homework assignment and let me know how you feel. She went on the ice, then she went back, then she went back. She decided to take lessons, and she's terrible and her knees hurt, but she had fun and she enjoyed it. And suddenly she started talking about it with people and making fun of herself. And her world wasn't fixed, but her world was a little lighter. So what I'm saying is there's a role for creativity, there's a role for experimentation, but more importantly, there's just a role for fun. And so a lot of people think, well, I want to decouple myself from work. It must be this really serious endeavor.
Right.
Maybe go take a painting class. I just took a pet portrait painting class and I was terrible. I'm a terrible painter, but it was really fun. And for 30 minutes, I didn't think about podcasting or writing, speaking, running a business. I just thought about painting my punchy little cat, Emma, and it was delightful. It was delightful. So I think fun is part of the answer.
Fun is part of the answer to undoing capitalism.
At the very least, if we have to live in capitalism, we should have a little bit of fun, right? Why not? Don't we deserve it? Don't we deserve an hour or two a week just to blow off some steam and do something goofy? I know it sounds naive and executives hate it, but they do it and it works.
That's it for this episode of The Anxious Achiever. The show is produced and edited by Mary Dew with production support and sound engineering by Nick Krinko. If you like what you heard, head to your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review. It really matters, and we appreciate the time and effort it takes. And if you don't subscribe or follow the show already, now's the time. And let us know what you'd like to hear more of. I get some of my best ideas from my listeners, so find me on LinkedIn, send me a message. You can find my weekly newsletter there as well. A big thanks to LinkedIn and all the listeners out there and our guests in the Anxious Achiever world. Until next time.